Rosa, how is Mexico responding to what we're hearing from the incoming Trump administration about how they plan to crack down on the border and carry out these mass deportations?
Well, very sternly, as a matter of fact, Mexico's president held a press conference this morning in response to President-elect Donald Trump's threat to impose tariffs on Mexico, actually. But Jim, as you know, all of these things are intermingled. Mexico's president was very firm. She called out President-elect Donald Trump, saying that both Mexico and the United States collaborate on a lot of different levels, including economically. And in other words, she said that she's ready to respond in kind. Let me read to you a portion of that letter that she sent to President-elect Donald Trump. She said, quote, "President Trump, neither threats nor tariffs will solve the issue of migration or drug consumption in the United States. Cooperation and shared understandings are required to face these important challenges. Imposing one tariff would mean another comes in response." I'm going to read that one more time because these are very important words from Mexico's president. Imposing one tariff would mean another comes in response, continuing like this until we put shared companies at risk. Now, the tone of this letter is very important because Mexico's president is not just talking about tariffs, about economic and the economic relationship with the United States, but also the border relationship with the United States, because Mexico has done a lot to help the Biden administration control the migration that is coming into the U.S. southern border, which begs the question about what is happening on the U.S. southern border, given that Governor Greg Abbott and the incoming U.S. border czar, Tom Homan, are on the border today. Here's the reality. The migrant apprehension numbers are extremely low. I talked to a law enforcement source, Jim, who says that on Sunday, migrant apprehensions were about 1,500. If you compare that to December of 2023, when 10,000 people were crossing the border per day, that just gives you a sense of the dramatic change. The reality is, and I've talked to both people on the ground, agents, and also advocates who work on the border, they say it is very low, despite what you're hearing from Governor Greg Abbott and the incoming border czar, Tom Homan. Back to you.
All right, Rosa Flores, important context. Thank you very much. Tom Homan was also on Fox News last night threatening to put the mayor of Denver, Mike Johnston, in jail if he doesn't go along with the administration's plans for mass deportations. Take a listen.
We agree on one thing. He's willing to go to jail. I'm willing to put him in jail. Because there's a statute, it's Title 8 United States Code 1324 III, and what it says is, it's a felony if you knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from immigration authorities. It's also a felony to impede a federal law enforcement officer. So if we don't want to help, that's fine. He can get the hell out of the way.
To discuss, I want to bring in Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She's a Democrat from Texas and a member of the House Accountability and Oversight Committee. Congresswoman, the Trump team hasn't even entered office yet, and you have a high-level incoming official like Tom Homan threatening to put the mayor of one of America's biggest cities in for mass deportations. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, so I have a couple of reactions. Number one, they just made up this position, okay? Like, they created this position. This isn't something that, say, the Senate has to consent to. This is a random kind of henchman of Donald Trump's, number one. Number two, the job of that particular role is not to incarcerate people. If this man wants to be the one that is going to enforce our laws, then maybe we should look for him to be the Attorney General of the United States, because seemingly it doesn't matter whether or not you're qualified to fulfill that position for Trump. It's just about whether or not you will arrest the people that he wants arrested. And this was one of those things that we tried to warn people about with Project 2025, which is this idea of we will go out and we will incarcerate people. This is the type of thing that they claim was happening to Trump and his friends, instead of people accepting the reality that Trump and his acolytes are actual criminals. You know, right now we have people that are deciding that they are going to criminalize those that are not doing what Trump wants them to do. Yeah, and I do want to ask you about Tom Homan, because his role seems to be an unofficial part of Homeland Security. He focuses on the border while Kristi Noem she's been the pick for Department of Homeland Security Secretary. Yeah. Apparently she's going to focus on everything else. She has to be confirmed by the Senate.
he does not.
Correct.
What do you make of all that?
Well, I just want to say, hopefully she has nothing to do with our pets and our animals, since, you know, we remember what Christie did. But I do think that if they are trying to implore him with the type of power that he believes that he's going to have, then he should absolutely be confirmed by the Senate. And in addition to that, you know, we've been having lots of conversations about the fact that the Trump administration does not want these people that are going to go before the Senate to actually go through background checks, right? And so I think that that's another really important part of this, especially when we start talking about someone who now is trying to incarcerate people. This is outside of the purview of whatever this made-up position is, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, he should have to go through the same level of scrutiny if he is going to get this type of power.
And you have said that this is going to be devastating for your district if these mass deportations move forward. You've pushed for bipartisan reform. I mean, what is going to be the impact in your district if this goes through? And can Democratic officials in cities and different municipalities, I mean, if you have Tom Homan threatening to put a mayor in jail, what really can you do to say we're not going to go along with these mass deportations?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can't lock everybody up. That's number one. Number two, when we look at the economics of it, like, this team is not really doing the smart things around economics. They're doing the smart things that may help out some of their cronies, right? Because if you're going to do the mass deportations, then that means that you have to have more deportation facilities to house them in. So I'm sure that there's somebody who probably participated in mass incarceration and benefited from that. Somebody is going to benefit, because now it's like, oh, well, we're going to need housing for them. So yes, one of Trump's friends, one of those people that most likely funded his campaign, will say, well, we will build this for you so that you can house them. But when we look at the rest of us in our economy, when we look at things, I serve on the agriculture committee, when we look at who is actually going out and farming our land, it's not that we are raising our kids to do that here in the United States. These are realities. We tell everybody you've got to go off to college. We don't tell them we need you to go and work on the farm and make sure that we can keep the cost of food down. And so we've got to stop demonizing these people that are actually contributing to our economy. And we also have to pay attention to what's happened in places such as Japan. When Japan decided to close off its borders and what happened to it economically, I challenge people to go and Google what happened to Japan when they did that and how they had to reform.
Well, and I was going to ask you about Trump's threats of tariffs. We just heard Rosa Flores talk about this a few moments ago. Obviously, a very stiff response coming from the president of Mexico. But in this hour and in the previous hour, we've talked about the economic impact that you might see from these tariffs. We had a fuel expert earlier on in the program saying you could have higher gas prices if these tariffs on Canada go through. If Rosa Flores was saying in the previous hour, if you have tariffs on Mexico and those goods coming in from Mexico, you could see the price of avocados, for example, go up. A lot of agricultural products come in from Mexico. Your thoughts on what the economic impact might be? And I guess the other question is, if there are so many folks out there worried about high prices at the grocery store and so on, what might these tariffs do in the long run?
I think this is a conversation that we needed to have more in-depthly prior to the election, to be perfectly honest, because I feel like a lot of people are now understanding how tariffs work, but I feel like we must not have fleshed this out really well to make sure that people understand that, number one, like your laptop that is sitting here, guess what? It's not all made in one specific country. The screen may come from one country. The chips may come from another country. The keys may come from another country. And as I've traveled the world and talked to different American chambers around the world, we've talked about what it would take to try to get some of our businesses maybe to help out in some of our friendlier countries. And we've had to talk to the heads of states and the directors of finance and talk to them about their tariffs, because here's the deal. If you start to say, well, you know what, those keys that don't get made in the United States, they're going to cost more. Well, guess what? The laptop is going up. So this is what we're going to see across the board. But as you
Democrats tried to warn voters about this before the election.
We did.
Kamala Harris called it a tax on the middle class and so on.
It is.
But it didn't work out for her in the end.
It didn't resonate, and I think it is because tariffs isn't something that we talk about every single day. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. You know, if you don't understand why your food is more expensive, then you may not necessarily be inclined to be listening to us have a conversation about tariffs. But this is the bread and butter, literally, of what is going to raise prices. And as we've just talked about, or you talked about, listen, we've got record high travel. Right now, we know that, it may not feel the greatest right now when we want prices to be lower, but we at least have the money to travel right now. We at least have the money to make sure that we're going to have Thanksgiving. And I can't say the same is going to happen next year if he goes through with these tariffs.
All right, well, we'll see. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, thanks as always for coming in. We appreciate it.